Hello, welcome to Microfiche Microphone. I'm Micah, and on this channel we look at microfiche from the past, old newspaper articles in the public domain. We look at them with our modern eyes, our modern perspective, and see what we can learn from them. On this microfiche time capsule, we are looking back at the Improvement era from July 1932. And this article is entitled Greatness in Men, James E. Talmage, by Bryant S. Hinckley, president of Liberty Stake. So, what do I know about James E. Talmage? I would say I know that he was an apostle and that he has written a lot of books. Some of the classics of Mormon literature, like Jesus the Christ and the Articles of Faith, like that. Can't say I know very much about his life. I know that I believe he has a doctorate, but I don't know in what subject, and I think it was science related though. And I know that he's not very photogenic. So I'll show some pictures here, but he looks very severe, almost angry in his pictures. I don't know that he looked like that in real life, but sometimes people come across that way on film. I've known a few not terribly photogenic people, and it's always kind of funny because you're like, oh, you look so much better in real life. It's not fair, you know? So I'm assuming that he looks nicer in real life anyways. So let's take a look. There's a little quote at the beginning. Scholar, teacher, writer, lecturer, scientist, and apostle. Dr. James E. Talmage has been and is all of these. In this article, President Hinckley reveals the path by which this man mounted from immigrant boy to apostle and to proud position of being one of the ablest defenders of the church and the saints in these latter days. I didn't know he was an immigrant. He must have immigrated as a child, though, because I'm pretty sure he studied in the U.S. All right, so there's a picture. As you can see, he looks a little bit stern. He has that little furrow between his brows, and I think he had small eyes, because sometimes in some of his photos, he looks like he was trying to open his eyes really wide, and I think it's because people told him he has small eyes, and he's trying to make them look bigger. You know, I've done that myself before. As a fellow person with small eyes, I can relate. All right, let's take a look at the article. Professionally, a scientist and a preceptor with gifts and powers acquired by few, Dr. Talmage, I thought he was a doctor, is also a writer and speaker of great ability and skill. But I think he has a doctorate, not a medical doctor. But I could be wrong. Maybe he is a medical doctor. Let's find out. He is an absolute master of English, both by pen and by tongue, and possesses a musical eloquence of marvelous fluency and precision. Yeah, some people are gifted that way. His style of oratory, though not stentorian, okay, is wonderfully impressive. Okay, I'm sorry, I have to look that up. Sometimes you just learn some new vocabulary, you know? Stentorian means of a person's voice, loud and powerful. Okay, so like a booming voice. So he does not have a booming voice. Is that what I understood correctly? Though not stentorian is wonderfully impressive, okay? His well-stored mind, capacious memory, quick recollection, and remarkable readiness of speech render him an ideal instructor in public and private. Why are there quotes? Like there wasn't a beginning of the quote. I guess it was at the very beginning and they just completely neglected to put it on there, but okay. Such is the estimate of the historian Orson F. Whitney, as recorded in Volume 4, History of Utah 30 years ago. Okay. Sure. This is an accurate appraisal of Dr. Talmage's ability. He is a scientist, a teacher, a writer, and a speaker. I thought they just throw out the word scientist. It reminds me of, like cartoons where they're like, you know what this will mean for science? And you're like, well, what branch of science? Do you have any idea how many branches of science there are? You know, well, they're just like, oh no, they're scientists, scientists. You're like, well, can you be more specific? Like, are they a physicist, or are they an astronomer, or are they, a biologist? Are they a chemist? There are so many different branches of science. Like, can you be more specific? I don't know what branch of science Dr. Talmage studied, but I'm hoping they'll get to it. If not, we will fact check ourselves. Oh, gosh. Since the day this was written, he has, with unusual diligence, pursued the tasks that have come unasked to him, and has moved steadily forward, adding to the list of academic honors which he won early in life, and constantly contributed with his pen and tongue to the advancement of science, of education, and of theology. Once again, which science? His later life confirming all the bright prophecies that were made of him as a young man. Really. The historian speaks of him as a scientist. Once again, while he was permitted to follow this line, he made important contributions in various fields and early won international recognition for his work. He is scientifically minded and has stimulated interest in scientific study through his original work and through his ability to present and to popularize the subject. He was the first to establish courses in domestic science and agricultural chemistry in the Intermountain West. That's at least something in one direction. Under his direction, the Deseret Museum was made a large and influential institution. So domestic science and agricultural chemistry. So he did studies in like fertilizers and stuff, like farming techniques. Is that what I'm understanding? He is a teacher of extraordinary ability, always in complete mastery of his subject, fascinating and inspiring in his presentation, exacting but reasonable in his requirements, constantly stimulating his students to great endeavor. He is an ideal teacher. Okay. He's not the first person who is a teacher who was an apostle, so, I mean, you see my article on David O. McKay. He has majored magnificently as a writer and a speaker, and will best be known to coming generations through his writings, but remembered best by the present generation for his eloquence as a speaker. There is indeed a musical eloquence about his speaking which gives to it a fascinating and persuasive quality rarely surpassed. Yeah, the thing is, I think he's right. The author, Bryant, as Hinckley, he's right about James E. Talmage being remembered for his writing, long term, but short term for his speaking. And I think that's very insightful, and it's very, it's not something most people recognize. So I do appreciate that he said that, because he absolutely is known for his writing today, and not so much for his speaking. So, yeah, I appreciate that he acknowledged that, yeah. He has spoken before congresses and colleges, from the pulpit and the platform, on the streets and over the air, with an impressive effect. Would it not be interesting to speculate just where his splendid abilities would have taken him in any one of several fields of endeavor had he chosen to follow them? His father and his grandfather were medical men, and he had a predilection for that profession, and had he followed it, would undoubtedly have become a renowned physician. Yeah, he probably would have been, because he seems very intelligent. Anyone acquainted with his capacity, his resourcefulness, his readiness in debate, and his ability as an advocate would at once accord him an eminent place among the great jurists and lawyers of his time, had he elected to that profession. Both of these fields were very alluring in the days of his young manhood, and would have brought to him worldly preferments and emoluments out of all proportion to anything he received. He would have gone to great heights in journalism, or won distinction on the lecture platform. The question naturally arises, what determined his course? What led him to choose the major work of his life? The answer is easy to one acquainted with him. He has always sought divine guidance and the counsel of his brethren in making important decisions, and has followed the counsel given without question or hesitation, and with ultimate joy and satisfaction. Dr. Talmage is deeply religious, and has always been active in the church. Since December 8, 1911, when he was set apart as one of the Council of the 12, he has devoted himself almost exclusively to his ministerial duties, and has given a service distinguished for his scholarship and consecration. His life has been an example and an inspiration to young people who have looked to him with pride and admiration. He has, with learning and with logic, defended his faith at home and abroad, and expounded the doctrines of the Church with a clearness and cogency unsurpassed. James E. Talmage will go into history as one of the ablest and most brilliant advocates of Mormonism. In this work he has found lasting satisfaction and made the supreme contribution of his life. Without question, it is greater and more fundamental than anything he might have done in other fields. Well, it's debatable, but I think it's a good point, though. There's a picture here, May Booth Talmage. I'm assuming that's his wife. I'm sure we will find out. But, yeah, he was an academic, yeah? James E. Talmage was an academic. He was all about learning. James E. Talmage was born in the little town of Hungerford, Berkshire, England, September 21st, 1862. See, I had no idea he was born in Britain, and came with his parents to this country, arriving in Salt Lake City in June 1876. At age 14. Yeah, 14? I wonder if he still had a British accent then. I was not aware of that. I had no idea he was British. That's so crazy. The family became established in Provo, and James entered the Brigham Young Academy at the opening of its first regular academic year. Yeah, probably the first year he was there, yeah? In his native land, he was a diocesan prize scholar at 12 years of age. At 14, he entered the Brigham Young Academy and came in contact with Carl G. Mazer. So Brigham Young Academy, at the time, when it was called that, was basically a high school. But it was at the level where children didn't have to study anymore, so it was called an academy instead of a university because it wasn't after high school, you know? It was that in-between stage of after you no longer had to study, I think it was 8th grade, until the university level, which was 4 years, and yeah, so it was kind of a bigger deal. So you started at 14 and usually were done at 18. If you didn't have to repeat a grade or anything, or, you know, take a year off or something. Anyways, so that's kind of the younger end. But since he was already renowned for his scholarship from his native country, like that makes sense to me that he went straight to Brigham Young Academy. And he came in contact with Carl G. Mazer, who was not slow to discover that this English boy possessed superior possibilities. The 55 years which have passed since he enrolled in that institution have verified all the hopes and anticipations held out by Dr. Mazer concerning this boy. Among the thousands of students who have registered in that institution since its establishment, we do not call to mind any one more highly endowed than he is. His mind, luminous and absorbent, coupled with his matchless industry very early in life, won for him a proud place among the scholars and leaders of his time. His contact with Carl G. Mazer was a fortunate and happy one, for Dr. Mazer was indeed a technician in the fine art of character building. There was a lofty idealism about him, and a rational and enlightened faith permeated all he said and did. This had a deep and permanent influence upon the life and character of Dr. Talmage. Although the academy was in those days small and financially poor, there was something great about it. The soul, the atmosphere of the institution radiated to every city and hamlet of the church, carrying the name and fame of Carl G. Mazer, James E. Talmage, and others. In June 1879, so that's 4 years later, no, 3 years later, so at the age of 17, he was graduated from the normal department of that institution, the highest in his class at age 17. And in his 17th year, he was employed as a regular instructor there, teaching elementary science, Latin, and English. Okay, interesting. So they immediately hired him on as a teacher after he graduated. He taught full-time and received for his services the munificent sum of $3 per week, or $120 for the school year. The second year, his pay was increased to $5 per week, and that was before the days of Depression. Okay. I can't compare that to today because that's far too long ago. I don't know how much that is. But actually, you know what? There's converters and stuff like that, right? So let's see. This is just an estimate. I don't think it looks like an estimate. $100 in 1879 is equivalent to $3,145.40 today. But he only got $120 a year. Gosh. Imagine working, what was that, $5,000 at most, not even. $5,000 for a whole year's worth of work, working full time. Like, oh my gosh, he was extraordinarily underpaid. The second year, his pay was increased to $5 a week. Yeah, zippity-doo-dah. Ugh. They paid teachers terribly. Okay, before entering the services of his alma mater, he was offered a responsible and a highly remunerative position for those days in the public schools of Provo. He needed money, and needed it badly, I believe that, and was in grave doubt as to just what would be the best thing to do. Following his usual custom, he sought divine guidance. Retiring to a secluded place to a nearby canyon, he prayed with all his fervor of his soul for wisdom to guide him in his decision, and received a clear and satisfying answer to his prayer. After which he went cheerfully to work in the academy, not knowing what the remuneration would be. And so all his life he had had the humility and the faith to seek light from the divine source. Wow. The current of his religion's life runs deep and still and strong. He has never drifted from the moorings of his early faith, which is childlike and beautiful. His life furnishes many illuminating and faith-promoting lessons. Well, that's really interesting. I'm going to pause for a second because there's a lot of stories here, so that's just going to keep going. But it's that he was willing to work for nothing, basically, as long as he felt it was the right thing to do. I mean, that really shows a very high moral character. I'm impressed. I'm definitely impressed. And since we've already paused, let's take a look at some pictures. This is Susanna Preeter Talmage. I believe that's his mother. I think it is. It's not labeled as such, but I'm guessing. And then this is James Joyce Talmage, father of James E. They said that his parents were academic as well. He named himself after James Joyce. Well, he didn't name himself. I guess his parents named him after James Joyce. That's cool. And then an hour of reading enjoyed at home. Okay. Everyone is entitled to that. When asked, when and where did you receive a testimony of the gospel? He answered, that I do not know. I believe I was born with it, as I belong to the third generation of Talmages in the church. My paternal grandparents, James Talmage of Raspbury, Wiltshire, England, and his wife, Mary Joyce of Hampshire, England, were the first or among the first to join the church in that part of England. My bad. So his father got the middle name of his mother's maiden name. Okay, that makes sense, I guess. My father, James Joyce Talmage, and my mother, Susanna Preeter Talmage, became members of the church before I was born. They were active and devoted members, so yeah, that was his mother. Continuing, he said, though I seem to have been born with a testimony, yet in my early adolescence I was led to question whether that testimony was really my own or derived from my parents. I set about investigating the claims of the church and pursued that investigation by prayer, fasting, and research with all the ardor of an investigator on the outside. While such a one investigates with a view of coming into the church, if its claims be verified, I was seeking a way out of the church if its claims should prove to me to be unsound. After months of such inquiry, I found myself in possession of an assurance beyond all question that I was in solemn fact a member of the Church of Jesus Christ. I was convinced once for all, and this knowledge is so fully an integral part of my being that without it I would not be myself. Wow, that's quite a strong statement. I mean, that you believe so strongly in your convictions that you wouldn't be yourself without them. I can see that, though. On June 15, 1873, he was baptized and confirmed a member of the church by his father. His baptism took place under circumstances of the most extraordinary character and published in the Era, volume 25, page 675. He was ordained a deacon, teacher, elder, high priest, and apostle successively. I'm sure not all at the same time. In conversation, he said, every call I have received to office in the priesthood has come to me because someone was needed to fill a particular place, and was in no sense a matter of advancement or honor to myself as an individual. The greatest joys of my life have come to me through activities in the church, and these have been the activities of a member rather than an officer. Early in life, I realized that I would have to live with myself more than with anybody else, and I've tried to so live that I would be in good company when alone. I like that. I try to be a good enough person that I liked myself. I really like that. I think everybody should have that attitude. Try to be the kind of person that you think is a good person, so that you would want to be around, because you have to be around yourself. You can't separate yourself from yourself. After concluding to devote himself to education, he laid plans for taking a college course, and thus better prepare himself. Many of his brethren, to whom he looked for advice, warned him against this, feeling that it would jeopardize, if not destroy, his faith to go away, from home to college. He finally asked advice from President John Taylor, and with reference to this visit, Dr. Talmage said, I have often marveled at the kindness and condescension of President Taylor in spending nearly 2 hours with me. In the course of our conversation, he inquired into my work and plans. He advised me strongly to enter a university in the East, and, to my grateful surprise, laid his hands on my head and blessed me for the undertaking. The blessing thus pronounced has been realized in both spirit and letter. That's lovely. That is so lovely and really elevates my opinion of John Taylor. I mean, not that I had a bad opinion of John Taylor, but like just, yeah, like that, someone who would actually take the time to sit down with a young man who is trying to decide what to do with his life and advising him to follow his heart. Like, that is really impressive for somebody so busy as the president of the church. Like, 1882, he was president of the church. Brigham Young passed away in 1877. So, yeah, in 1882, Dr. Talmage entered Lehigh University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, as a special student and passed, during his single year of residence, nearly all of the requirements of a 4-year course and was later graduated from that institution. He must have had an incredible workload. Wow. Like, to pass, I'm hoping that he passed them by taking exams, but that means that he must have been incredibly well informed. Like, that's really impressive. While a student there, he was offered a position as laboratory assistant, which carried a salary sufficient to meet his needs for the next year. This was a distinct recognition of his ability. He declined this offer and went to Johns Hopkins University at Baltimore, Maryland, where he specialized in chemistry and geology. Now we finally have a branch of science. Here again, he won recognition, and the most enticing prospects were held out to him. He was called home to resume his work in the Brigham Young Academy and responded to the call. What do you mean called home? They called him to come and be a teacher? Here he served as professor of geology and chemistry with varied activities in other departments. I'm a little confused by that. While still at the faculty, he was elected a member of the Board of Trustees of the Brigham Young Academy. During his residence in Provo, he served successively as city councilman, alderman, and justice of the peace. Well, that's not one you hear every day. Alderman. His services were now eagerly sought, and many opportunities were open to him. He was president of and professor of chemistry in the Latter-day Saints College, 1888 to 93. President of and professor of geology in the University of Utah, 1894 to 97. In the last named year, he resigned the presidency but retained the chair of geology, and 10 years later, 1907, he resigned this professorship to follow mining geology. He likes rocks, huh? In 1891, he received the degree of Bachelor of Science, and in 1912, the degree of Doctor of Science from Lehigh University. Oh. Well, I wonder what degree he received immediately. Okay, so hang on. That makes sense. 1891, so he received the degree of Bachelor of Science. Okay, so he started there in 1882, didn't he? Yeah, 1891, he was working at the Latter-day Saints College during that time. I wonder if he then kept up correspondence to fulfill, like, the last few requirements of his schooling. Yeah, that would make sense. In 1912, the degree of Doctor of Science from Lehigh University. So 1912 was while he was working at the University of Utah as a geology professor. Cool. I guess professor didn't have to have a doctorate at the time. I guess there probably weren't enough if that was the case. In 1922, he received the honorary degree of Doctor of Laws from the University of Utah and from Brigham Young University. He belongs to many learned societies and has traveled extensively in scientific pursuits. Yeah. I don't really think that's that big of a deal when you get an honorary thing. It just means that you're a prominent person, that you've done a lot of cool stuff. It is kind of cool. I like that they recognize people like that, but it's not really necessary. It doesn't really speak to exactly what you've done to earn it, because you haven't earned it. It was honorary. So, it's awarded. All right, let's look at some pictures. So this is James E. Talmage as he appeared in academic robes. Once again, harsh look on his face. And he has that furrowed brow, yeah? Dr. Talmage in his private laboratory. Yes, he looks much more at home there, doesn't he? Than in his academic robes. And this is mining geology has held a prominent place in his vocational life. Well, that's because he was interested in it, yeah? Cool. For many years, he has been a fellow of the Royal Microscopic Society, London. That's interesting. Fellow of the Royal Scottish Geographical Society from Edinburgh. Fellow of the Geographical Society, London. Fellow of the Geological Society of America. Oh, sorry, the first one was geographical and then the second was geological. Okay. Fellow of the Royal Society of Edinburgh, okay, Associate of the Philosophical Society of Great Britain, or Victoria Institute, and a Fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Well, most of these organizations that he's part of are from Great Britain. I must be through correspondence because he didn't live there, as an adult anyway. His connection with these societies had given him a standing and a recognition among men of great influence which could not be secured in any other way, and he has used this for the advancement of the Church, and it has meant a very great deal. This was conspicuously the case when he presided over the European mission in 1924-28. As a result, the attitude of the newspapers throughout England was entirely changed. Really? In this way, Dr. Talmage has been able to give a service which probably no other man has thus far been able to give. Really? Oh, in what way? That's not very specific. If this article were devoted exclusively to his educational and scientific achievements, it could scarcely catalog them in the space allotted. Yeah, that's probably true. In addition to all of this, he has written extensively on theological and scientific subjects. Among his writings are First Book of Nature, Domestic Science, The Great Salt Lake, Present and Past, Tables for the Blowpipe Determination of Minerals, an account of the origin of the Book of Mormon, the Articles of Faith, the Great Apostasy, the House of the Lord, the Story of Mormonism, the Philosophical Basis of Mormonism, the Vitality of Mormonism, Jesus the Christ, Sunday Night Talks by Radio. I think we are familiar with a handful of those books, probably not so much the academic books, but the religious books. I think most of us know many of them. Articles of Faith, The Great Apostasy, House of the Lord, The Story of Mormonism. I'm not familiar with the philosophical basis of Mormonism or the vitality of Mormonism, but I do know Jesus the Christ, and I think pretty much everyone knows that, and I think that's the book that most people think of when they think of James E. Talmage. So, correct me if I'm wrong, obviously, because not everyone thinks of the same things. To get a correct estimate of the character of Dr. Talmage, one must know something of his domestic life. One discovers the same capacity for always doing the fitting and appropriate thing at home as, continued on page 567, as elsewhere, and doing it in an original and superior way. When the record of his life is written, one of the most charming and fascinating chapters will be the one narrating the little things of his home life, things which contribute so much to the joy and satisfaction of living. There are intimate letters to his children and grandchildren on occasions such as their baptisms or birthdays accompanying some appropriate gift. These letters reveal the tender side of his nature, and he has a very tender nature, really. The care which he has taken of his children in their infancy and in sickness is not only scientific and efficient, but soulful and tender. Yeah, I was wondering about that. 44 years ago this June, he married Mary May Booth, a daughter of Richard Thornton Booth and Elsie Edge Booth of Alpine, Utah, a most sympathetic and companionable woman of transparent honesty and of unusual intellectual capacity, who seemed to complement almost perfectly the life of her distinguished husband. Yeah, see, the thing is, if you're a very intelligent man, you have to marry a very intelligent woman, and vice versa, because otherwise you're gonna feel like you can't talk to them about anything you're working on, so I would expect his wife to be very intelligent as well. That she has kept abreast of affairs and combined homemaking with successful and valuable public and church service is attested by her excellent work in the European mission during her sojourn there with her husband, her 38 years of helpful service in the General Board of the Young Ladies Mutual Improvement Association, and other similar work. This union has been blessed with 8 children, 7 of whom survive, all born in Salt Lake City: Sterling B., Paul B., Elsie, James K., Lucille, Helen May, and John B. Talmage. It is an unusually talented family, so he continued the tradition of naming a child after himself. Since his grandfather's name was James Talmage, his father's name was James Joyce Talmage, and he is James E. Talmage, and his son was James K. Talmage. They just changed up the middle names. I wonder if they call them by their middle names, because the name James has been taken. I don't actually know his middle name. Just a guess, Edward. I don't know. It's just a guess. But yeah, that's interesting. This, I don't know. It's a little interesting that are all super talented. They said it's an unusually talented family. His love and admiration for the woman whose wisdom and companionship have meant so much to him, his affection for his children, and his solicitude for their welfare, is recorded in a correspondence which we venture will some day be found among the most precious and delightful things he has written. We are permitted to use a letter written from Siberia nearly 35 years ago. From Siberia. Why was he in Siberia? For Elsie, in Mama's care. Kitchtim, Siberia, Russia, and Asia. The way they had to address things, it's very funny. August 16th, 1897. Elsie, my darling daughter, a father's fondest greeting to you on this, the first recurrence of your natal day. Was it her first birthday? Okay. Such I send to you from the plains of the far east, from the steppes of Siberia. I write in the light of the early dawn, at an hour which you, on the opposite side of the earth, in the same Sabbath hour, at which 1 short year ago you came to gladden our hearts, and to call forth our prayers of thankfulness, the hour at which your sweet mother reached the depths of the shadowy valley known as the Valley of Death, whither she had fearlessly gone to find you, my child. But the great Father, who is your parent as he is ours, guided and guarded her through the threatening darkness, and led her along the rough path of painful recovery, until she emerged from the pain and the travail, once more a sanctified mother, with you, my darling, an added jewel to her crown. May the one completed year of your life be the first of many, each bringing increasing wisdom and growing goodness in the service of our God. May the blessings pronounced upon you by the power of the eternal priesthood be realized in all your life and work. May you live to be a sisterly guide to your brother's feet, and a comfort to the mother whom God has given to you and to me. And in the Lord's due time may you be crowned an honored mother in the house of Israel. Peace, happiness, and the love that knoweth naught but good be yours, my darling and my pride. Affectionately, your father. I send you blossoms, leaves, and ferns, gathered for you on the slopes of Sangomak. I'm assuming they were dried, otherwise they would never have made their way all the way there. That was really lovely. That's really lovely. First of all, that he takes the time to write a letter to his 1-year-old child on her birthday so that she can cherish it. Because she's not going to know that. I mean, 1-year-olds don't remember their first birthday. You know, she's not going to remember that he wasn't there. She is going to always keep this letter as a sign of her father's love for her. Also, the way that he describes the process of birth is very respectful. There's too many people in this world who are just brush it off as nothing. But it is a serious business. It is difficult, and it is long, and it is, a process. It is a big process. And so you have to have respect for that. And he clearly does. And I very much appreciate that. That makes him a bit of a feminist as well, in that he recognizes his wife's major part in her life up to this point. And that's really impressive. I'm like, that was the one thing that impressed me the most so far. Like, I'm blown away by the compassion and the foresight and the affection of this person. Very impressive. There's a little picture. I don't think it has anything to do with anything, but I'll show it anyway. It's some sort of landscape. Anyway, moving on. This daughter, Elsie Talmage Brandley, associate editor of this magazine, referring to him, said, "From the earliest memory of his children, James E. Talmage was a man who knew everything and could explain most of it in a way to be at least partially understood by immature minds. Questions as to what thunder is made of, where water comes from, how high the sky is and why it is blue, and numerous others of similar character were never met with a weary "do be quiet." Always there was a carefully worded explanation which helped to clear up the puzzle. To children this was a boon. Confidence in the clear understanding of their father and his ability to make things plain to them was a strong part of the feeling which his sons and daughters held for him. Strange and fascinating little bugs were shown to them through a microscope, quiet things from strange lands and unfamiliar parts of their own, or in which could be seen glints of precious metals, specimens of crystals, rocks, lime formations, and other unusual though natural peculiarities. All were regular parts of the hours which this man spent with his family. Later, the certainty that could explain problems and make them simple carried over into fields other than the physical and geological. Questions of a more vital nature were propounded and clarified. Questions of life and death, where people came from and where they were going, of how to find the true values of life. Implicit faith in his answers helped them to take their ideas explained and weave into their adolescent philosophy. Some of these children, now grown, feel that no problem can present itself which cannot be met satisfactorily by the man who has never failed them when they needed help, their father. Nice. So he was also a reliable father, like in real life, and not just on paper. That's great. Like, I have a lot of respect for this person right now. The breadth of his interests, the reach and penetration of his mind, the capacity of his memory, his matchless industry, the felicity with which he expresses himself, make him delightfully companionable any time or at any place, and at the same time give him an accuracy of thought and a directness of action that accounts, in part, for his prodigious accomplishments. He does more than is humanly possible for most men to do. He has been known to work all night and go to his regular task in the morning without rest or relaxation. And so his achievements are not due entirely to an imperial mind, but to the determined will to work. He produced his greatest work, Jesus the Christ. See, I'm telling you, most people think it's his greatest. Writing all the manuscript in longhand, proofread, and issued it from the press in less than a year. That's impressive. It's a long book. At the same time, he carried on with much of his regular work. On September 21st next, he will be 70 years of age. While presiding over the European mission, he met with an accident which injured his knee. Otherwise, he is in sound health, his mind keen and vigorous and working at high speed. Dr. James E. Talmage has a superior intellect, a pure and a contrite heart, a radiant faith, a sane and lofty idealism, a clear understanding of the meaning and purposes of life. He has achieved splendidly in the world. His life reflects credit upon his name and his people, and has added strength and majesty to the great church in which he has given a consecrated allegiance. All right, that's the end of that. I mean, honestly, the letters to his daughter and from his daughter are really the ones that tell me more about his character than anything else. Yeah, intelligent person, but that's not a character, thing. It's not a part of his character. He is an intelligent person, which is all well and good, except for the fact it doesn't tell you if he's a nice person or not, So, and all you know is that he looks very severe and that he's written some very scholarly works, which is great, but that doesn't tell you about his character. So that last page was absolutely essential to me to understand his character. So now let's do some fact checking in James E. Talmage. And I am interested in this because I hope this article isn't too long. Okay, I'm going to skip a little bit. Probably some of his academic stuff. Yeah. Okay, it's a little bit long. His middle name is Edward, by the way. James Edward Talmage. So, I will repeat again, I use Wikipedia as a second source. I am not writing an academic paper. If you were, you would look up some more reliable sources. This is simply just a second source on top of the one we just read. Yes, that's all. Okay, James E. Talmage. 21 September 1862 to the 27th of July 1933. Oh, he died right after this then, because this article was printed in July of 1932. This was just a year before he died. Wow. Was an English chemist, geologist, and religious leader who served as a member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, LDS Church, from 1911 to his death. A professor at Brigham Young Academy and University of Utah, Talmage also served as president of the University of University of Utah, and Latter-day Saints University. In addition to his academic career, Talmage authored several books on religion, the most prominent of which are Jesus the Christ and Articles of Faith, which remain classics in Mormon literature more than a century after publication. An academic and religious scholar, Talmage did not believe that science conflicted with his religious views. Regarding the conflicting Mormon views on evolution, Talmage attempted to mediate between church leaders B.H. Roberts and Joseph Fielding Smith. who disagreed about evolution and the origin of man. In addition to his academic and religious involvement, Talmage was involved in a local political leadership in Provo as a city council member, alderman, and justice of the peace. They mentioned that. But that's funny because we've talked about B.H. Roberts believing in evolution, and he wrote a whole book on it. And Joseph Fielding Smith, who believed in creationism and completely disagreed with B.H. Roberts, and I believe Joseph Fielding Smith got his way, mostly because he was already an apostle and B.H. Roberts was a 70. So they both wrote books about it. But when Joseph Fielding Smith published his book on it, and I believe it's called Origin of Man or something like that, and David O. McKay, who was president of the church at the time, told him, this is not doctrine. You know that, right? It's not doctrine. And he's like, but this is what I believe. And he's like, well, it's not doctrine, though. And he told him to his face that this is not true. So it's funny that James E. Talmage then tried to mediate between the two of them. It sounded like it got quite heated, that debate. Early life and education. James E. Talmage, the son of Susanna Preeter and James Joyce Talmage, was born on the 21st of September, 1862, and raised in Hungerford, Berkshire, England. He was born in the Bell Inn, a hotel in Hungerford, where his father was the manager. Okay, I'm assuming they had a separate section for the family. Talmage's parents converted to the LDS Church probably in the 1850s before his birth. Yeah, he did say he was born into the church. Neighbors and local clergy did not like the Talmage family's membership in the LDS Church or their innkeeping business, which included serving alcoholic beverages during the temperance movement. That's funny. Shortly after Talmage's birth, his family moved into a cottage in Eddington where most of his 10 younger siblings were born. Talmage moved to Rambury to stay with his grandfather at the age of 2. I wonder why. There he attended infant schools and received some schooling from his grandfather. He returned to Hungerford to live with his parents at age 5. As Talmage was spending his time helping take care of his siblings and helping at the inn, he attended school sporadically for the next 3 years. Really? That's impressive he did so well then. At age of 12, he graduated from elementary school, passing the Oxford Diocesan Association exam for the second-class certificate. Talmage received a distinguished primary education and was named an Oxford Diocesan Prize Scholar after 6 years of schooling. He was baptized a member of the church at age 10 on 15 June 1873, but due to local hostilities toward the Latter-day Saints, he was baptized in secret at night. The same year, he accidentally pierced his younger brother Albert's eye with a digging fork, blinding him. Oh my gosh! Oh! He must have felt terrible about that. He moved his family to Provo, Utah Territory in 1876. In Provo, he studied the normal course at BYA, Brigham Young Academy, with Carl G. Mazur as one of his teachers. He graduated in 1879 at the age of 17. He became an instructor at BYA while continuing to study. In 1881, Talmage became the first graduate from the scientific department at BYA and the first student from BYA to receive a college degree. Oh gosh, there's a lot of information all of a sudden, yeah. Further education and career. Talmage's early predilection for the sciences, and in 1882 and 1883 he took selected courses in chemistry and geology at Lehigh University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. After graduating, he started advanced work at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland in 1883. In the spring of 1884, while at Johns Hopkins, Talmage journaled about many laboratory experiments, including one on the ingestion of hashish. Yeah, I heard that. And it doesn't really surprise me that much because I recall, that's marijuana in case you're not aware. Marijuana was not illegal at the time. There wasn't really any regulation at all, and so it was simply a question of scientific research at the time. I don't think it was that deep, to be honest. After researching at Johns Hopkins, he returned to BYA and became a professor of geology and chemistry. Shortly after returning to BYA, Talmage became the counselor, chief assistant to the principal, Mazur, and worked as acting principal during Mazur's absence. He also became a member of BYA's Board of Trustees, an alternate member of the Utah State High Council, and was a common speaker at youth meetings across Utah County. And the same year, Talmage was elected as a People's Party candidate to the Provo City Council. His main goal in joining the city council was to implement anti-saloon legislation, but he did not succeed, which is kind of ironic considering what his parents were, hassled for back in the day. Shortly before taking office as a member of the city council, Talmage had a lab accident that nearly cost him his sight. Ooh. A few months later, he was elected an alderman, which added judicial as well as legislative duties to his assignments. I wonder if it made his eyesight worse, which may explain the glasses, but maybe he just wore glasses, like some people do. LDS College. In the summer of 1888, Talmage was recruited by the church's first presidency to lead the new Salt Lake Stake Academy in Salt Lake City, a high school for the stake, where he worked closely with Angus M. Cannon. In 1889, the Salt Lake Stake Academy was renamed LDS College, and Talmage continued as its head until 1892. While in this position, he was recruited widely to give lectures to civic groups at various assemblies connected with the LDS Church and other groups. One of Talmage's first tasks as principal of LDS College was to write a science textbook for the youth in the school. Really? He produced First Book of Nature, which went to press in November 1888. That's really early in his career, you know. In 1891, Talmage published a work entitled Domestic Science at the urging of Wilford Woodruff and the other members of the First Presidency. This was a more general work on science aimed at an older audience. In April 1889, Talmage was appointed a member of the examining board for all schools of LDS Church, along with Mazer and Joseph M. Tanner. This board approved teachers to teach with any school run by the church. Okay. In January 1891, Talmage was replaced at LDS College by his assistant, Willard Dunn. Talmage was appointed, along with Willard Young, to form a new university to be run by the LDS Church in Salt Lake City called Young University. He continued lecturing on scientific subjects at LDS College throughout the end of that academic year. U of U president. I'm going to skip this. I don't think it's that interesting. Academic citizenship. Okay. This might be interesting. In 1891, Talmage became curator of the Deseret Museum. In 1909, while Talmage was serving as the director of the Deseret Museum, he went to Detroit, Michigan, in November of that year to participate in diggings connected with the Scotford Soper Savage relics craze. I don't know what that is. Talmage would go on to denounce these findings as a forgery in the September 1911 edition of the Deseret Museum Bulletin in an article entitled The Michigan Relics, The Story of Forgery and Deception. In 1911, after becoming a member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, his son, Sterling Talmage, replaced him as curator of the Deseret Museum. Sounds like he's also interested in science. Okay, the Michigan relics are a series of alleged ancient artifacts that were discovered during the late 19th and early 20th century. They were presented by some to be evidence that people of the ancient Near Eastern culture had lived in the North America. Okay, since this discovered is in quotes, I'm assuming it was a forgery, yeah. Talmage spent much of the summer of 1890 in Britain. His main goal was attending the meeting of the Royal Microscopical Society, where he gave a lecture on the Great Salt Lake and its brine shrimp. He also presented some horned toads that were then donated to a branch of the British Museum. During this trip, he regularly participated with missionaries of the LDS Church in street and other meetings. Really? He also spent time in and around Hungerford gathering records of his ancestors to do their temple work. He then traveled continental Europe, including Italy, with Reed Smoot and two other missionaries about to return home. That is so impressive because, it's kind of going down on the level of the little man, you know? You're a big, important dude, and you go to this area and you're like, hey, let's get some missionaries together and do some street contacting, you know? That's really impressive. He's a very down-to-earth person, sounds like. That's just really surprising for someone so very, very academic. For many years, Talmage was a fellow of the following learned societies. Okay, they're going to list a bunch of things, isn't it? I'm skipping it. Mining consultant. I also don't care about that. Sorry if you do. You can always look it up yourself. Okay, LDS Church Writings and Service. Religious literary works. Talmage was the author of several religious books, including The Articles of Faith, The Great Apostasy, The House of the Lord, and Jesus the Christ. These volumes remain in print and are still widely read in the LDS Church. In 1905, the church's first presidency requested Talmage write the book that would come to be known as Jesus the Christ. They requested he compile his lectures about the life of Jesus Christ into a book that would be widely available to church members and other readers. At that time, Talmage had many responsibilities with his church callings. his family, and his profession that kept him from starting the book, but nearly 10 years later, following another request from the First Presidency, he started writing Jesus the Christ. The significance that was placed on the writing of this book about the life of Christ is seen in the First Presidency setting aside space in the Salt Lake Temple for Talmage to work on the book uninterrupted and without distractions. Cool. Jesus the Christ was published in September 1915, just under 1 year after Talmage started writing it, which is really impressive. That's very fast. In 1911, the First Presidency learned that a man named Max Florence, a former theater owner in Salt Lake City, had gained unauthorized access to the Salt Lake Temple. He had taken numerous photographs of the interior and was holding those photographs for ransom. But the church president at the time, Joseph F. Smith, would not negotiate with Florence on the subject. Florence said he would sell the pictures to anyone who named a high enough price. A few days after this news was publicized, Talmage suggested to the First Presidency that they commission their own photographs of the Salt Lake Temple and publicize them as a book of photos. Smith authorized Talmage to get the pictures and also write on the subject of the temple to accompany the publication of the photographs. The House of the Lord was completed and published shortly thereafter in 1912. That is really smart. So if ever anybody's going to leak something, then you leak it yourself. Yeah, you get ahead of that and you put your own information that you want given in it so that it doesn't matter what they say. It's old news at that point. Yeah, you've absolutely taken their thunder. So that's a really good suggestion. Church service. Before he became a member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, Talmage was an alternate high counselor. I don't know what that means. In the Utah Stake of Zion. He became a member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles on 7 December 1911 after Charles W. Penrose was appointed as second counselor in the First Presidency. Additionally, from 1924 to 1928, Talmage served as president of the church's European mission. Views on science and religion. This is probably important, so I'm going to go ahead and read it. Talmage was an attentive student and a teacher of science, but he did not believe there was conflict between science and religion, and did not worry about differences or discrepancies between the two fields of thought. He believed that with time and continued learning, these discrepancies would eventually be resolved. He had confidence in the scientific method and was able to accept scientific discoveries and findings supported by it while still holding fast to his religious beliefs. His views on science and religion are demonstrated by this statement. Within the gospel of Jesus Christ, there is room for every truth thus far learned by man or yet to be made known. This is kind of how I feel about it. Talmage's views on science and religion can also be seen through an event that took place in 1929. In that year, B.H. Roberts, a scientific scholar and LDS church leader, presented a 700-page manuscript to the First Presidency which attempted to completely align theology and science. Other church leaders were concerned with what was written in this manuscript and disagreed with the claims about evolution represented. Joseph Fielding Smith, then a member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, made a statement against that which was written about evolution in the manuscript prepared by Roberts. Talmage tried to mediate between Smith and Roberts, suggesting that the First Presidency that they come out with a statement of neutrality on the issue, which they did. They soon came out with a statement stating that neither side of the argument was accepted as church doctrine. Yeah. Basically, the thing is that the church cannot accept one or the other and say with certainty that this is what happened, because unless it was revealed of God. And since it hadn't been, they don't have a stance on it. And I think that that is a good position to have. They might even say, tentatively, that we don't know yet what happened then. So, we're staying out of it completely. And maybe it will be discovered in the future that there was something like slightly different than what we accept now. We don't know that because we can't see the future, Anyways, I think that's very wise. And I also really like that he says that there's no conflict. And that's kind of how I feel. I feel like you can read what's in the scriptures, and I feel like it's written by people. So people write things as they understand them. That doesn't mean that it was expressed in such a way, or the way that you understand what they said or what they wrote is the same as what they understood when they wrote it. And so you're making that big assumption when you're reading the scriptures that you understand it the way they understood it. And you can't do that because you don't know that person and you don't know how they were feeling when they wrote it. So, that's my opinion. And that as we learn more about science, then we understand more about God. That's what I think, and that's how I feel. Political involvement. Almost immediately after his return to Provo, Utah, after his schooling in the East, Talmage was asked to run for the office of Territorial Superintendent of Schools by the People's Party. He could not accept due to his recent appointment as the first counselor in the presidency of BYA. Additionally, he was ineligible to run for office since he was not a United States citizen. Yeah. Soon he applied for citizenship and received his naturalization papers. Oh, really? And although he was uninterested in political involvement aside from necessity, Talmage went on to serve in the Provo City Council as an alderman and as Justice of the Peace. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense, yeah. Talmage died on 27 July 1933 in Salt Lake City at age 70. He was buried in Salt Lake City Cemetery. The vacancy in the Quorum of the 12 created by his death was filled by Charles Albert Callis. Personal life. In 1888, Talmage married Mary May Booth on 14 June 1888. Booth was a native of Alpine, Utah, and a daughter of immigrants from Lancashire. Really? She started studies in the normal school connected with BYA in 1885 when she was 16. It was there she met Talmage, who was one of her instructors. Of course he was. Gosh, I'm sorry, that's really cynical of me. Ugh. You know, it's just there tends to be a lot of age gaps in the relationships there. But it's, she was born in 1868, and he was born in 1862. So I guess there's not that huge of an age. 6 years? That's not that bad. Okay, it's not that bad. But she was 16 at the time. You know, he was 22. I just don't like it, that's all. I don't have to like it, I don't know them personally. While at BYA, Booth was secretary of the Philosophical Society. After completing her course of normal study, May took a job as a teacher in Kaysville, Utah. A few months later, Talmage took a project to study the waters of the Great Salt Lake. Talmage's main reason for this journey, though, was to pursue his relationship with Booth, and 5 months later, they were married in Manti, Utah. Okay, well, I do like that he waited until she was an adult and could fully consent to the relationship. I do appreciate that. So they met when she was 16. That doesn't mean that they started dating then. It sounds like they started dating a couple years later. Yeah, after she became a teacher. Okay, respect. The Talmages had 8 children. Among their children was John Talmage, who wrote a biography of his father. Another of their children, Sterling B. Talmage, 1889 to 1956, became a geologist. Legacy. The Mathematics and Computer Sciences buildings at Brigham Young University is named after James Talmage. The University of Utah College of Science is housed in the James E. Talmage building. I have an issue with them naming the Math and Computer Science building after him, because he was a geologist and a chemist. It's like, it's one of those things, like, yeah, he was scientific, that doesn't make him a mathematician. You know? I don't know, I find that annoying. Plus, computer science wasn't even a thing at the time when he was alive. So, published works, there's a lot of them. I will put them up on the screen so you can take a look if you want to pause it, and so I'll just keep talking for a moment while it's scrolling or, going through the screenshots. Anyways, so I find that really interesting, and like I said, I have gained a lot of respect for him. I feel like he makes a lot of decisions like I would have made, I mean, if I were in that position, which I'm not, but like the way of saying, people are going to leak pictures of the Salt Lake Temple, why don't we publish them first, or people are arguing this question of evolution, why don't we make a statement from the church saying that we are neutral on the subject? We're not on either side of this. And that way, B.H. Roberts and Joseph Fielding Smith can argue their sides on their own, but not with the backing of the church. Neither one of them. And I think that's really wise. I think that's very wise. And I feel like he was a very wise person. And compassionate and kind, and he loved his kids, and and he never forgot what it was to be a normal, quote unquote normal person, doing street contacting with missionaries, very down to earth. I really admire this person, and I hope that you got as much from that as I did. yeah, I thought that was really cool. Anyways, if you liked the video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in the next video.